Buon pomeriggio a tutti, benvenuti al Politecnico di Milano. Sono Ilaria Valente, sono la preside della Scuola di Architettura, Urbanistica, Ingegneria delle Costruzioni. Sono lieta e onorata di aprire la cerimonia di premio della 10ª edizione del premio Michele Silvers. Il premio è stato istituito 10 anni fa alla memoria di Michele Silvers, giovane architetto di talento, laureato al Politecnico di Milano, che purtroppo è mancato prematuramente. Il premio, della cui istituzione siamo grati alla madre di Michele, signora Silvia San Silvers, e alla sua famiglia, è dedicato ai progetti di laurea in contesti internazionali, perché Michele è stato uno studente che ha avuto diverse esperienze internazionali, sia prima che dopo la laurea. La sua laurea era dedicata a un progetto di housing in Giappone e l'ha condotta con i professori Roberto Spagnolo e Anna Giovannelli. Michele Silvers ha avuto dunque un percorso emblematico, allora non comune a molti studenti, ma negli anni successivi la scuola ha sempre più indirizzato gli studenti verso esperienze internazionali e accolto numerosi studenti provenienti da ogni parte del mondo. La cerimonia di oggi ha dunque un significato particolare, perché è il 10° anniversario. Oggi avremmo voluto essere in presenza, ma purtroppo il protrarsi della pandemia ci ha tenuto ancora online. E dunque, prima di passare la parola alla signora Silvia San e alle curatrici Lola Ottolini e stamattina Cusidi, che voglio ringraziare molto, voglio anche ringraziare Anupama Kundoo, che è la nostra keynote lecturer. Thank you to Anupama Kundoo, our lecturer. Sorry, we are dealing in Italian and then in English. We are useful of this type of speeches. Ecco, quest'anno insieme a Lola stamattina e alla signora Hassan abbiamo pensato di invitare una donna, un architetto di talento. Siamo tra l'altro a pochi giorni dall'8 marzo, ma questo direi che è casuale quasi, con l'idea di celebrare anche il coraggio e la determinazione delle donne nel loro lavoro, nella vita quotidiana. Abbiamo infatti visto come ancora una volta durante la pandemia le donne siano state poste in condizioni di fragilità e come con coraggio abbiano affrontato l'impegno sul lavoro, nella vita familiare, nella cura dei più deboli. E quindi il nostro è un omaggio al coraggio e anche al coraggio di Silvia San. Voglio anche ringraziare la giuria, formata dalle colleghe Laura Daglio, Lola Ottolini e stamattina Cusidi, e congratularmi con tutti i nostri laureati che hanno partecipato con progetti molto interessanti a questo premio. Dunque grazie e vorrei adesso passare la parola a Silvia Hassan. Grazie.
Grazie mille, solo 2 parole per ringraziare naturalmente la preside, professoressa Valente, appunto, che è sempre stata una grande promotrice, scusate, di questo premio, e le 2 curatrici, la professoressa Lola Ottolini e stamattina Cusidi, con le quali si è subito creata una grande empatia non appena ci siamo incontrati. Ma quest'anno veramente, naturalmente, oltre alla professoressa Anupama, desiddererei ringraziare 2 persone che sono sempre, diciamo, rimaste dietro le quinte, perché sono un po' delle deus ex machina, dee ex machina, senza le quali niente funzionerebbe come in realtà funziona. Mi riferisco all'architetto Efise Cipolloni, del Politecnico di Milano e alla professoressa Dani Macnuz della Scuola, perché sono in realtà loro che hanno, diciamo, sono proprio hanno masterminded questo premio, e sono sicura che mentre parlo già vedo le loro sinapsi che lavorano febbrilmente per inventare qualche altra iniziativa. Poi naturalmente ringrazio il professor Arbib, ma soprattutto naturalmente i ragazzi che sono i veri protagonisti del premio. Sono i ragazzi a cui questo premio è dedicato, perché come dico sempre, questo premio è una candela accesa nel buio, perché come dicono i nostri saggi, quando sei nelle tenebre più fitte è molto meglio cercare di accendere una luce piuttosto che continuare a maledire le tenebre. E questo è quello che abbiamo voluto fare per farci coraggio, e anche perché la luce si riverberasse su tanti ragazzi e potesse fare loro coraggio nei momenti di scoramento, che poi capitano a tutti, ma anche guidarli verso il successo. Io vorrei che tanti ragazzi fossero presenti, io non so quanti ci sono, perché con questa trasmissione così in virtuale non si capisce con chi si sta parlando in realtà. E quindi veramente io ringrazio questi ragazzi, vorrei che credessero in loro stessi e che appunto vorrei che questo premio li incoraggiasse a seguire i loro sogni. Ecco, tutto qua. In un certo senso Michele è arrivato fin dove ha potuto. Adesso tocca ai ragazzi. Vorrei che prendessero testimone e continuassero invece il suo. Grazie mille.
Grazie mille Silvia. Sono Lola Ottolini, co-curatrice del premio con stamattina Cusidi. E con grande piacere adesso lascerei la parola al rabbino capo di Milano, il professor Alfonso Arbib, per un suo breve contributo.
Bene, buonasera, mi sentite? Sì?
Sì,
Si
sì,
sente?
sì, sì.
Bene, buonasera. Volevo dire due parole, mi è stato chiesto di dire qualcosa riguardo all'educazione, che è un elemento fondamentale ovviamente in ogni cultura, ma nella cultura ebraica c'è un rapporto particolare con l'educazione. La cultura ebraica è una cultura basata sull'educazione e la religione ebraica è basata sull'educazione, e questo credo che sia abbastanza particolare. L'educazione è al centro di tutta la tradizione ebraica. Però l'educazione non è semplice, in realtà educare non è semplice, educare è complicato. Io vorrei provare a dire in 2 minuti qualcosa su quello che è, secondo la tradizione ebraica, su che cos'è educare secondo la tradizione ebraica. Voglio dirlo attraverso un commento di un rabbino contemporaneo a un passo della Torah, del Pentateuco, in cui si parla dell'accensione della menorah, cioè l'accensione del candelabro a 7 braccia, che c'era nel santuario di Gerusalemme, che c'era anche nel santuario che accompagnava gli ebrei nel deserto. La menorah, la luce della menorah è una metafora dell'educazione, come tra l'altro in qualche modo ha detto anche Silvia, parlando dell'accendere una luce piuttosto che maledire il buio. Bene, come si accende la menorah? Ci sono due elementi nella accensione della menorah particolari. Il primo elemento è questo. Colui che accende la menorah deve salire su un gradino e accendere la menorah. Non c'è niente di eccezionale in una cosa del genere. Per accendere deve essere su un gradino, la menorah è abbastanza alta e quindi deve essere su un gradino. In realtà la menorah non era così alta. Era alta circa 1,60 m e quindi si poteva tranquillamente accendere senza salire sul gradino. Bastava alzare il braccio. Perché bisogna salire sul gradino se la chiave di interpretazione è quella dell'educazione? Perché io non mi posso accontentare di educare in maniera superficiale. Nel momento in cui educo devo guardare bene chi sto educando. Non posso guardarlo dal basso verso l'alto, devo riuscire a salire e guardarlo bene in faccia. C'è un passo della Torah molto famoso in cui si dice che un passo che ha dato origine a un famoso equivoco di Michelangelo Buonarroti, un passo che dice che quando dopo la promulgazione del Decalogo Mosè aveva la faccia che risplendeva, cioè emanava dei raggi di luce. E per questo motivo si mise un velo sopra la faccia. Però il velo bisognava toglierlo quando si insegnava. Nel momento in cui Mosè insegnava, doveva togliere il velo. Ecco, un educatore deve guardare in faccia chi sta educando, deve riuscire a creare un rapporto. Questo è un elemento fondamentale dell'educazione. Il rapporto maestro-allievo è l'elemento fondamentale dell'educazione. Senza questo non c'è educazione. Non ci può essere educazione. L'educazione non è semplicemente libri, non è semplicemente studio. L'educazione è il rapporto maestro-allievo. E il maestro deve fare in modo che il rapporto ci sia. Però c'è un secondo elemento. Un grande commentatore Rashid dice che chi accende la menorah deve accendere fino a che il lume, la fiamma, non vada avanti per conto suo. Bene, che cosa insegna in chiave educativa questa fiamma che va avanti per conto suo? Insegna qualcosa di importante. Da una parte, educazione significa rapporto maestro-allievo, significa legame fra maestro-allievo, ma d'altra parte chi educa deve essere anche in grado di lasciare autonomia all'allievo, di fare in modo che la fiamma vada per conto suo. Non può essere continuamente presente e non può legare l'allievo a tal punto a lui da non renderlo indipendente. E quindi educare significa fare in modo che la fiamma vada per conto proprio. Paradossalmente, da una parte l'educazione è il rapporto maestro-allievo, dall'altra è la capacità del maestro di fare in modo che l'allievo vada per conto proprio. Si racconta di un grande maestro del Hasidismo, che è Rabbi Menachem ben Mikotsk, che a un certo punto abbandonò il suo maestro e andò a studiare da altre parti. Gli chiesero: ma stai tradendo il tuo maestro? Lui rispose: no, assolutamente, sono molto fedele al mio maestro. Il mio maestro a 18 anni abbandonò il suo maestro, io a 18 anni ho abbandonato lui. Ecco, la capacità di dare all'allievo l'autonomia e la capacità di fare le proprie scelte, questo è un altro elemento fondamentale dell'educazione, che da una parte la rende affascinante, dall'altra la rende complicata, perché in realtà non è così semplice questo processo. In realtà questo processo richiede un grande impegno, anche una grande abilità. Grazie.
Grazie mille di questo contributo che incoraggiano tutti noi che ci occupiamo di educazione, che dobbiamo incoraggiare e generare autonomia nei nostri allievi. Lascerei adesso la parola alla professoressa Anna Giovannelli per un breve saluto. La professoressa Giovannelli è stata la professoressa di Michele durante i suoi studi e anche correlatrice col professor Spagnolo nella tesi di laurea di Michele. Ora la professoressa insegna progettazione dell'architettura all'Università La Sapienza di Roma.
Grazie, ringrazio tutti. Mi sentite intanto, perché in questa dimensione virtuale non abbiamo la verifica, grazie. Ringrazio tutti per questo coinvolgimento che mi emoziona moltissimo. Infatti nell'esprimere, diciamo, come mi è stato chiesto, alcune parole su Michele, ho riflettuto sul fatto che avevo scritto alcune righe nella pubblicazione di un volume proprio sui lavori dei miei studenti in quel bellissimo momento della mia vita didattica che è stato l'incarico di insegnare ai laboratori di primi anni proprio al Politecnico, appunto. E dunque vorrei dire che ho incontrato Michele nel 2002 ed era iscritto al secondo anno, quindi al laboratorio di progettazione, e era insieme a un gruppo di ragazzi curiosi e intelligenti, appassionati all'architettura e molto motivati. Lui era forse uno dei più timidi, ma non ha mai fatto della sua timidezza un limite, anzi era molto raffinato nei modi e determinato negli studi. Devo dire, immediatamente manifestato questa spiccata attitudine proprio per l'approfondimento sia diciamo teorico che mettere in campo proprio l'abilità del fare progettuale della disciplina. Immediatamente ho potuto riscontrare le sue qualità proprio nelle prime verifiche progettuali, che non sono state mai limitate alla sola esperienza accademica. Lui era molto curioso e si interrogava moltissimo sulle problematiche, diciamo, del suo tempo, perché era un giovane che voleva orientarsi in un mondo molto complesso, aveva voglia di esplorarlo il mondo. Infatti dopo, come ricordava la professoressa Ilaria Valente, diciamo, questa capacità di muoversi in un orizzonte internazionale lo aveva portato dapprima a fare l'Erasmus in Spagna, e poi quando si è ritrovato con i suoi cari amici, erano un gruppo abbastanza coeso per la tesi di laurea, io avevo chiesto a loro, che mi avevano un po' coinvolta per questo ultimo tragitto che era quello della tesi di laurea, li avevo orientati verso le questioni del riuso, ma lui non era del tutto convinto, e quindi a un certo punto, dopo questa esperienza a Tokyo, elabora appunto il tema dell'housing e lo esplora, diciamo, in maniera straordinaria, indagando diverse tematiche del tema dell'housing in generale, poi diciamo approfondito sulle questioni proprio dell'aggregazione di diverse tipologie. Qui nel mio studio si stanno creando dei rumori che, scusate, disturbano un po'. Ecco, diciamo, Michele, come diceva, e ringrazio moltissimo per le lucide parole il rabbino capo, era uno di quegli studenti che effettivamente bisognava guardare negli occhi per comprenderlo fino in fondo, perché appunto per la sua timidezza forse magari non era molto comunicativo, ma in realtà riusciva a scatenare, no? Nella capacità dell'educatore forse quella marcia in più per comprendere come si può trasmettere un sapere ad una persona generosa e in grado di restituire tutto quello che un docente può insegnare. Sono molto commossa dalle parole di Silvia San Silvers, che abbraccio con molto affetto. Non ci vedevamo da molti anni e insomma Silvia, sono davvero contenta di vederla, e come mi fa piacere rivedere lei, mi fa piacere rivedere la professoressa Valente e Fisia e tutti coloro che insomma hanno voluto la mia partecipazione a questo importante evento. Grazie, scusatemi la confusione.
Grazie
Eccomi.
mille, grazie davvero. Io volevo solo rubare 2 minuti come co-curatrice di questa edizione del premio, di questa 10ª edizione. Organizzare questo premio è stato come fare un viaggio in cui, come ci insegna Michele, si conoscono luoghi, si conoscono persone e culture diverse. Questo viaggio l'ho fatto in compagnia di un gruppo di persone di grande competenza e di grande professionalità, prima tra tutte la mia co-curatrice Martina Cusidi, e poi con Efisia Cipolloni, memoria storica del premio, e Lucia Sartorio, Federica Stucchi e tutte le persone della scuola che hanno aiutato nell'organizzazione di questo evento. In questo viaggio siamo state insieme a Laura Daglio, che ha partecipato ai lavori della commissione giudicatrice, in più di 30 paesi del mondo. Un mondo che abbiamo conosciuto e esplorato attraverso gli occhi degli studenti che in quei paesi hanno progettato e di cui abbiamo guardato i progetti. Grazie a questo viaggio abbiamo conosciuto Michele, la sua enorme passione per l'architettura e in particolare per l'interesse di quando l'architettura entra in dialogo con culture e società diverse, che poi è diventato il tema di fondo di questo premio. E con Michele Silvia San, che sostiene questa iniziativa con grandissima tenacia. Voglio poi ricordare una tappa speciale che è stata l'incontro con i rappresentanti della comunità ebraica e in particolare con le persone che abbiamo incontrato alla Scuola ebraica di Milano e con cui a partire da adesso vorremmo come scuole cominciare a condividere progetti. Col coinvolgimento di tutti e di coloro che prima di noi hanno lavorato al premio siamo arrivati qua alla 10ª edizione, in occasione della quale stiamo realizzando insieme al Laboratorio Immagini di Design una testimonianza video di cui vedrete oggi un'anticipazione. E speriamo che proprio questa 10ª edizione possa essere uno stimolo di suggestioni e contributi per tutte le edizioni che seguiranno, all'insegna del viaggio, dell'architettura e dell'incontro tra culture diverse. Lascio ora la parola a Martina Cusidi che introdurrà la nostra ospite. Grazie a tutti.
Good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the organizing and the curatorial committee, I am very pleased to welcome architect Anupama Kundoo to the 10th ceremony of the Michele Silvers Award, and to have the opportunity to introduce her lecture. Kundoo's work crosses between professional practice, research, exhibition, and teaching, and takes a stance on contemporary social and environmental issues. Her projects are rooted to their specific context, while expressing a keen interest in making a global change. It is for this reason and from this standpoint that we have approached her with my co-curator, Lola Ottolini, earlier this year to invite her to speak to us today. In the context of an architectural award, which is driven by an international vision. Anupama Kundoo graduated from the Sir J.J. College of Architecture at the University of Mumbai in 1989. She started her practice soon after, at the age of the many young graduates of the school who are present with us today. She has built extensively in India and contributed many projects to the city of Oroville, a site of architectural experimentation. Kundoo is professor at the Fachhochschule Potsdam and has previously taught architecture in a variety of cultural contexts, among them the University of Queensland in Brisbane, UCJC in Madrid, and Cornell University in New York. She adopts a research-based approach to architecture, interpreting the project as a site for experimentation and innovation. Her own residence in Oroville, for instance, is suggestive of this approach, having been developed in close connection with her PhD thesis at TU Berlin in 2008. The project was replicated at the 2012 Venice Architecture Biennale and represents one of the moments in which her work has been exhibited internationally at institutions that include the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Eco Museum in Madrid, and currently the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark. Anupama Kundoo's work, in a final note before handing over to her, explores connections between high technology and craftsmanship, modernity and tradition, the past and the present. Sustainability, she has stated, and I quote, is not only about what materials and technologies are involved in the construction of architecture, but also about the validity and relevance of contemporary ideas over time. Before leaving the microphone to her and thanking her for being with us today, I would like to thank the Dean of the school, Professor Ilaria Valente, for having trusted to us this edition of the award. And I would like to leave the microphone now to Anupama Kundoo. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that I'm unmuted, you can hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
So thank you so much for having me here and for all your kind words. And it's really nice to join you and hear your ideas about the relevance of my research. It's very, very gratifying to listen to that, because 30 years ago when I started my practice, immediately after graduating, I had a sense of urgency and I wanted to feel, I felt that a lot of things we have done in the past are perhaps more relevant than what was happening in contemporary practice. And I took a lot of risks to try to pave the way for a kind of future practice. And I'm so happy to see that 30 years of persistence has got somewhere, and that work that was done over so much time resonates with global quest today in an age of climate change, but also with COVID asking us to really rethink everything. So very happy to join you, and I'm looking forward to the interaction later. I will try to share my screen now. Just give me one moment. And now I'm almost there. Okay, you see it?
Yes, yes, we can.
All right. So I'm using this title, Rethinking Urban Materiality in the Age of Climate Change. And I want to, right at the outset, explain that I do believe architecture's essence does not lie in its materiality, but rather it's the opposite. It's the void that humanity has been designing throughout history to be able to inhabit with the human body, to create the climatic and other protection that human beings need to be able to conduct their activities. So, but the last 100 years, post-industrialization, we have started building our buildings. The materiality of our architecture, maybe it represents more problems than solutions, because the way we are building and the way the building industry has been taken to be the normal today, it actually creates so many environmental, social, and economic problems that former generations used to probably not have exactly in that format. And therefore, it's very urgent to really rethink the urban materiality. So I'm not here trying to make materials more important than space and all the other things that architecture meant, but to really bring the focus that this is an area to radically rethink. I would like to start with my context in Bombay, but also, these are the kind of worrying images in which it suggests the landscape in which I graduated and what was my sense of urgency to not add to this kind of problems which we were creating. So there is a new urban form that is developing in the rest of the world. You can see it. You don't see it so much in Europe because old cities are being rejuvenated and gradually new things are being added. But in the rest of the world, there is such an acceleration of building activity in the name of development that it creates a tug of war between the environment and our own habitat. We are threatening our own livability somehow, and neither the process nor the product is satisfying. In fact, this kind of you see 3 or 4 skylines are occurring in every city. There is a slow growing, chaotic urban form. There are commodified housing, large supply chains delivering habitat and everything else, all other non-habitat buildings and cities at a very high pace. And to build that, there is migration occurring, and you are creating informal settlements without realizing that this is all man-made constructs. So social, economical, and environmental imbalances, which are the sign of our times, and they are happening in every city. I have noticed even in a city like Madrid, if you look at the periphery, you find exactly what is growing, what our society's values, it manifests in the urban form. And if you compare it to old cities, we don't know what we are leaving really behind to the next generations who will inherit this. So when I graduated, this thought, which I'm quoting from Peter Drucker, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. This was the type of thought that used to haunt me. And I didn't want to just start my own practice thinking I know better or anything like that. But I just could not find the practice where I could work, where I would be able to intelligently contribute all the knowledge and high standard that my architecture school had instilled in me. I wasn't ready to produce with less consciousness and contribute to those type of practices. So it was a really big step I took, and I will now just a little bit walk you through what a bit the journey of my life, but also how I decided to first and foremost liberate my own personal time, so that if you don't take time, how can we employ all the other human refinements? How can we apply the human brain? How can we apply the human care? How can we apply our emotional intelligence if we just first and foremost are rushing about and trying to save time? And we are glorifying design when we have saved time, because we wanted to. Now after industrialization, we give all the power to keep the machines busy, and we don't question if the human being is doing well or not. So I wanted to first and foremost take the time, and once I took the courage to step out of that life, leave Bombay, start thinking first before acting, all the rest followed. I will, in order for the story to be a little more clear, and even though there is a philosophical take on my lecture, I do want to leave you with enough practical resources so that you can really know some of the areas where urban materiality has to be rethought. I've structured it around 12 strategies that I feel require rethinking. So the very first one is that to understand the big picture, not only in space, but also in time, because the big picture must inform the small actions. If we each of us make small micro decisions and we don't realize that it's all adding up to a huge problem, then we don't have the right perspective. So we absolutely need to do that. And therefore, we have to understand the metabolism of the city as a whole. In the case of India and China, I mean, if you look at the population, we are together 1/3 of the globe's population. And the way we will organize our cities, if people will use travel by cars or public transport, everything will change. You cannot just have a building and say this is made out of mud, this is more sustainable. We have to get out of the mud versus cement rhetoric and act like sustainability is something black and white. The big picture will allow certain human scale operations to go on or not. If you look at the past way of constructing, when I say past, I'm not at all trying to be nostalgic. I'm just saying, in order to understand our times, let's just go a few steps back, only 100 years ago, not more longer than that. We have, before industrialization, always the architecture, no matter where you are, whether it is Venice, whether it is Hampi here in South India, everywhere the materiality of the architecture was from the place. Local materials does not mean vernacular. It does not mean only traditional. Nothing wrong with that. But it can be contemporary. Like a contemporary chef, if he's using local ingredient, that doesn't make him traditional. You know, tradition is also evolving. But what was interesting in the past, people were investing time and culture, the refined eye. They were cultivating the eye, they were cultivating the mind, they were cultivating the hand. The human was getting cultivated. And this cultivation was making the stone be used in a very basic way or in a very refined way. And this is what you see in all the global architecture. So when architecture outlives our lives, and when all this wealth that our ancestors leave behind, we have to build less. We have high quality objects that we continue to use. Not very sure what will happen in our contemporary buildings. But if we look at it from this lens, you will notice that some of our contemporary practices, which depend on very high energy materials like reinforced cement concrete, where even brick worldwide, brick is not even being allowed to carry the load. We are not letting it accepted in the norms. We want brick to be only a filling material, whether you're in Australia, even in Europe. It's very difficult to get today such cathedrals, etc., through, because people will come up with all reasons why it will not be permitted. The human biology did not change. Homo sapiens are still the same. The needs are still the same. The law of gravity did not change. What changed? Why are we in only 100 years thinking different? Everybody is resorting to migration today. And if rural-urban migration, which was the only thing that was happening earlier, today we have migration through globalization and all kind of reasons. Sorry, I've to say something more here, that if we are going to be also having this amounts of migration out of politics or whatever, you cannot have every human is always starting with a new house. Are we building a bit too much? Should we, every problem we have, we want to build our way through it. If it's COVID, we want to come up with now new buildings for COVID. If there was tsunami, now everything is always like a new thing happens to us, as if the human being suddenly has to start from scratch. So something, in my opinion, is problematic on that. We have to work from the big picture. Second strategy, critically examining local materials. And I mean the importance is on the word critically. It includes how you source the material and transport the material. But it also includes material. For me, is not about only the material. It's not how the brick was made for its own sake. The material is important from the human's perspective. How is a human or a machine interacting with the material? This is important. The material is part of the universe. It is existing in one form, it will convert into another form. What is important is to critically examine the material from the point of view of how it advances the human or not. So I was looking at, for example, in pre-industrial brick making, like the bricks you see all over also Italy, and all the ways that the Romans have managed to make the engineering based on how this modularized unit can, through the curves of the bending moment, achieve resist and withstand the forces of gravity, etc. But also the way the bricks were made. The bricks were originally fired in kilns where the brick stack itself was the kiln, and the wood was coming from branches and thinnings, which are a waste material in reforestation. So when the kiln is made and the bricks are made, the whole pile was collapsed, and the rest of the year it was again an agricultural farm. So this kind of deep territorial relationships for the making of lime, for the making of the communities who are developing a knowledge about fire, about water, about the alchemy, about all these things. So when we solve this, the human being was getting more clever because there was a command on how to use things from the universe for our benefit. In anthropology, they also will tell you that what you make, it also makes you. And that's how the human brain and how we became clever. Every time you see a child learns origami or knitting, the mind is getting mathematical through that. If you make, it makes you. And if you stop making, I ask myself, what is everything consciously what we want? I'm not again referring to going back in history and advocating a nostalgic approach of tradition. I'm saying that the production of materials and the sourcing and the human hand in the thinking with the hand was refining the human also and not causing an environmental problem, and the production and sourcing of materials were remaining in the human scale. And maybe in the end we have to only ask ourselves, is the one thing wrong with us, is it the scale that has slipped out of the human hand and is more comfortable for the machine? So I did a lot of early interiors or projects where I tried to celebrate the intelligence of the embodied architecture. And like this, take the principles further, that these are self-supporting slabs of granite for contemporary interiors. So there was a lot of engineering knowledge trying to go on the edge, trying to use less and less materials because we had more and more knowledge to do so. So this was the thing that excited me in the beginning. And I didn't promote these crafts with the idea that I'm doing any patronizing favor to the local crafts and local economy, how many people write about my work. I just feel that homemade bread is better than the factory one. And I mean, if we can afford that luxury, we can have a good life. So I tried in the contemporary times to be able to sensitively look at my context and to make a very sensitive, not very loud architecture. Even though the materials are from the spot, they are rethought in a very invisible ways, little design interventions, so that architecture remains ingeniously made, intelligently made, not only through what I produce, but all the people whose hands were involved in making it. And the object that you create, it creates, the architecture is where it belongs. in the background, not in the foreground. It's the life that has to be in the foreground, not to produce only photogenic objects which look good, say in renderings or in, photogenic, that is not enough. We have to feel good ourselves when we are inside the spaces. And for future generations, it should be easy to adapt. I found that many people say that in today's economy, it is not possible to pay for some of these ways of building. Each time I did a building, I found out that it was more and more logical. There were many, many myths that people are following, which are based on wrong assumptions. And I found out not only this thing still costs less, if you think of the overall cost that you create something luxurious from the place, I don't have to ask myself that if I give my daughter a massage, it will be obviously more affordable and nice compared to if I go to some external source. We don't have to dismiss what is near us. That's what I'm saying. But today's economy often makes us dismiss what is near us, and we have to go to the large firms who are big enough, then we trust them. Same with the wine also, the small producers and the small batches are not worse. There's just over-glorification of the industrialized one who gives big quantities. So the third is building technologies. Similarly, we can audit our current building habits. So with the same material you chose before, you can have more or less percentage of handmade or machine-made according to the context. Like stone can be done in this form and that form, and the whole impact on the local economy and on the future of that settlement has a lot to do with this kind of negotiation. So the wall house, which you mentioned, that was shown at the Chipperfield Biennale 2012, is made out of, to celebrate my discovery that the pre-industrial brick in my region was weaker than the factory one, but I realized it was more superior because it was not using coal, it was not creating big chimneys, and it was using bio waste. I realized even the lime is better, and I added 10% of cement because the lime takes so long to set. To keep it contemporary, I did. You will see the proportions are quite similar, in fact, to the Roman bricks because they were thinner, because they were made for the hand to be comfortable, for the human artisan to not have to carry such heavy bricks to work that you need machines, So that's why the scale, the proportion, it was all in the body scale. And when I discovered that the bad brick is in fact the good brick, I decided to make exposed walls and everything out of this discovery. And that is what the wall house is. I also, here you see, I'm straight out of college, 23 years old, starting my practice. I discovered the potters who were losing their jobs to the growing urbanization. The livelihood was threatened. And I felt that if they were to produce with the knowledge, even I wasn't attached to the pot never being used again in the future. I was attached to saving the knowledge of the potter and the hands which gathered knowledge over years and generations. So we managed to divert some of their skills into making high quality terracotta products with which roofing systems could be made. This was my very first project, actually. Sometimes I wonder whether it was my innocence or courage to even start something like this. I think it was the innocence. And you see it's cooked with coconut shells, not coal. All the rating systems will tell you terracotta bricks are bad because they take energy. But actually, if you look at the qualitative energy, you will see how it is very narrow-minded to rate green buildings based on only quantity of energy. You should know what is the quality. Is it human energy or is it coal? Anyway, so we made these catenary roofs that are insulating. And this is what I mean by technology, to have knowledge to be able to use significantly less of no matter what material. So you see here, I was figuring out with masons, I was not getting too much support from the engineers. But after these buildings stand, then finally the engineers do agree that you have to give them a second chance to be calculated. Actually, these structures are more complex to calculate. In before industrial times, our ancestors were not lazy to calculate, because also they didn't have a choice. They wanted to build bigger spans, taller buildings, and so they were challenging their ingenuity. In today's time, there is a tendency to do what is the easiest, so that we have to do the least time. And then I ask myself, all the time you're saving of humans, what are we doing with that time? Are we enjoying more? You know, I have question marks about, are we not still more stressed than before? So anyway, as I went along, I also produced, I found other things they were anyway making, and I was able to use them to produce coffered ceilings, to produce formwork, to make concrete more efficient, you know, because as I was very much influenced by Nervi's work, Pierluigi Nervi, very one of my biggest influencers, I would say. And all that he was doing with formwork and light and Ferrocement, I was very much influenced by all those thoughts and that type of engineering. And this with terracotta allows me to save 60% of the steel because of this kind of formwork. And these were tests also done in the wall house for very big span roofs in other places. So the engineering going hand in hand with the local craft produced on the site with all the imperfection and celebrating the imperfection of the individual handmade is how the first bunch of, you know, these are very many roofing systems that are present in this house. About 6 systems are tested. And talking about Nervi, look there at the background, there is my own continuation of Ferrocement screens. More on Ferrocement a little later, but wall house was just my laboratory at that point. It's an example of what I did here, you know, to experiment, to save resources. And you see what I mean by technology here. Even the sections, even the elevations, they look like sections, so that in the future, nobody needs to ask me how it's made. They can see the section in the elevation and they can also build like this. Because if the gravity is addressed, then it is addressed. It will work elsewhere. So I did other buildings, which I'm going to slowly show you in brickwork. But a lot of my buildings became about finding this nice continuity between the interior and exterior, to not cut off the human being totally from his environment. And these modern concepts of climate engineering, I also wanted to challenge them, because now you see in COVID how important is porosity in architecture, that the air circulates and not the bad air going round and round inside your room. So this is a daycare center completed last year, but here you see, in this case, it is a factory-made terracotta that was more appropriate for this cause, because we have very little money and we were able to give these children from challenging backgrounds to have a very institutional type of security, you know, and a strong building in which to grow up. And there were many very humble buildings like this youth hostel that is produced, or this library with Braille books. These are very humble buildings with very minimum resources that I sort of was able to build based on that approach to technology. On the other hand, another strategy, I think, is a lot of vernacular materials. I already mentioned it. The time-tested materials are not being allowed due to our new norms. So I don't think we have to change. What we have to change is the norms. So we have to pursue knowledge. And I found that it was very important to do studies with round wood construction, because round wood allows us to use the whole timber, the wood, instead of cutting it into a rectangle section after 25 years, if you use it as a round section, maybe in 3 years you can already use it. So it makes reforestation actually possible. Now, when I left Bombay and I came to Auroville, this is the first hut I made for myself with very little means. I had a solar panel on the roof. So I didn't have electricity bills. My panel costed as much as the house, I have to say, at that time. I had a motorbike and a bicycle before that. But I lived very, very simply, you know, to be able to reduce the cost of my life, to not work as not for the wages or just for my own existence doing stupid jobs, but just to have the time to think where to put my time. And those type of decisions and this kind of lifestyle that I did for almost 10 years, actually, when I was working as an architect, I was living like this. So I want to say vernacular methods should be checked with a very scientific eyes and not in a religious, moralistic way, and see what should still go on. Participation is the next strategy. And the choice of technologies can sometimes alienate the tapping into people's time in circular economy. So I have done some projects which are of a co-housing nature, where I have decided to use rammed earth or certain materials just so that anybody can be part of making it. And the number of experts you have in a project should be maybe not so many, but if a technology is going to alienate people, see, if the people can reduce their bank loans significantly by giving a few hours of their time, it is really worth to tap into that. So these are some of those housing projects, larger scale things I have achieved to exchange between humans without always going through money. And that was for me one of the most important affordability strategies upon which many other projects are based later on. So you can see here that the streets are on upper level. There are also streets. It's a model for a high rise where very, very simple. Again, I did not have the luxury to have too many resources. And sometimes it's good, actually, it's a blessing. When you don't have too many resources, you become clever because you have no other choice. You find the best you can find. And this is an example of that. Here you can see there are other terracotta roofs because in the area these projects were built, there was this potters community. These are all insulated roofs produced with engineering and produced on site, the objects as well. Another very important area, particularly important for me to share with you, is not only as a general attitude, we need a new knowledge to build buildings, but every project is also an opportunity to build the knowledge. We cannot separate research somewhere and we do another life. Every action you do, it's going to shape us and create tracks. So for me, it's very important to acknowledge that we are part of a large collective. And it's not only, the architect is not a solo player, you know, like the knowledge that we seek as an architect, it goes hand in hand with the whole community because we don't want to limit the knowledge to only what we have singularly. And I think formally architects, even if they as a master are, you know, as we were seen, our profession in the past, they were seeing the whole community behind it. It was very impossible to say where the artisan began or the engineer came in. And I think this has been a very, it's a kind of, it's not a very good illusion that we are keeping up. And we need to let it go, this behavior to look upon architecture beginning and ending with what we think right now but try to establish the larger part. And in the building of knowledge, I'm especially putting a focus on this strategy because I'm talking to you in academia. I feel I also came into academia because I could have the conditions to look for the knowledge. I look at architecture through this tree trunk. Actually, I drew this sketch for Aravena when he called me to participate in the 2016 Venice Biennale. And he was talking about reporting from the front and the battleground. And I was responding by saying the tips of the route where we pioneer new knowledge in totally different directions, in environment, water, social issues, gender issues, material issues, technology, arts, everything. But we pursue knowledge wide and deep. But the trunk of the tree is, in fact, the architecture process, which has taught us over generations how to bring about a synthesis of all the knowledge. And the fruits are our projects. They can look different, but all the knowledge is assimilated. And according to the local context, it comes out the expressions. But if you have invested in your roots, if there is a tsunami, if there is a storm, if the tree goes down, it will come again. But if you make a big tree without roots, it will be nowhere. And everyday life will uproot easily where we are and what we have achieved as a community, as Homo sapiens in the world. Sorry, there is a little duplication over here. But in the knowledge building, I mean to say it is not restricted to the academia. Everywhere with various people, we are building the knowledge in the community. The ground realities should not be kept outside academia, and the wish to research should not be kept out of the sight. So I have a research-oriented practice, but a practice-oriented teaching. And I think the industry, academia, community, artisans, everyone can potentially collaborate. And that's another thing. I think the future should be about collaboration and not competition. There is no time to waste on paper projects. Everybody's idea can be manifested if you collaborate with others. That's how we can get a good environment. Another strategy is material innovation. Up to now, I talked to you about how can time-tested materials be rethought how can you make in new ways with the same material. Now I'm also saying there is a potential to also construct new materials. I will give you the example of Ferrocement, which I mentioned Nervi before. Actually, Nervi, his research was when they realized that reinforced cement concrete created too much self-weight for large span structures, he wanted to reduce the weight, and he introduced Ferrocement, which is like cement concrete but very different engineering behavior. It uses only thin chicken mesh, very little steel, but very finely distributed. And then you could make elements which are only 2.5 centimeters thick and reduce the weight. But you had to fold and bend it like thin sheets. Roger Anger and others had architects whom I was influenced by also in the 70s. They continued to build ferrocement. Nervi had reinforced cement concrete structure and ferrocement in between to make the weight less. So I have been actually using the plasticity of this material to investigate that since many, many years now, since almost 25 years or even more. From the very beginning, I'm always still researching ferrocement. It's an example of how you can prefabricate modular elements or in situ elements with very little material. They are very thin, very strong, and like this kind of stucco methods we also have in our tradition. I'm also trying to embed colors and pigments on the surface and wax it so that the cement is more soft and to the hand more pleasing to the eye, and it doesn't require any additional material. So these are the type of researches where I feel there is an incredible potential to continue. Not only that, I'm also interested in textile concrete. There are new ways of even doing cement, you know, so sustainability has not to say that only mud is good. You know, I think in the age of climate change, we do need cement. There were many very good ways ever since the Romans did lime, pozzolana, all of that stuff. There was, to cement is to make waterproof. So we need to do it, and there are many ways of doing it efficiently. I think that requires so much research too. I'm very much working on it. I have been working with engineers like Mike Schleich's department in Berlin. This is from the 2016 Venice Biennale, where all my research towards modular housing, etc., where you could look at new cements, new meshes with glass fiber, with coconut fiber, and all these investigations that are supposed to be done in the future. This image is from my Louisiana Museum exhibition, where I'm saying that there is a huge amount of research to be done in new materiality. In fact, what is known is so little about the universe, and compared to what remains to be known, that academia need not focus only on what is known, but what were the open questions in that what is known. That is what we are supposed to focus in academia. And I'm in academia for that. But these are some of the objects that I'm building, and the processes. Like, you know, this is in Germany, the Indian craftsmen. When I came to Venice to build that exhibition, I did not produce those objects in Italy or in India. I brought the craftsmen to the German laboratory to make the ferrocement, to deliver the pieces for Venice and to have the budget for that. But afterwards, in the laboratory, to test, look how this ferrocement piece, look at the earthquake qualities, you know, seismic properties, that there is a ductility, that it bends, it doesn't break. So this is the proof of that. So here's the image of what I did in 2016 in the same space, in the same spot of the Arsenale. It's an example of that. And I've been using ferrocement to use them as a lost formwork, to be able to do efficient shapes of beams. I have saved 50 cubic meter of concrete in a structure that now was using 75 cubic meter as opposed to 125 due to clever engineering. And I think these are all the kind of innovations that are about new materiality. This is a lost formwork. I made it in ferrocement so that the beam, which is more efficient if it would have a weird shape, it can be cast easily. And one other example that I have done, which is also very radical in the materiality, it is about building large-scale mud houses in situ. We built, it's a mud house, which you build with, stick it with mud bricks and mud mortar, you know, and then the whole house can be fired on the spot and becomes into brick. So you're getting the strength of a brick structure without using even any cement, by having cooked it in a large spot. These are the type of examples I mean, that new materiality can be explored. The reason to do that is because when I did all my brick research, I found out that the typical modern brick ovens, they use about 40% of the heat you generate, 980 degrees, though it keeps on going into the wall of the oven and waste. So if you can build a mud structure, treat it as a brick kiln, fill it like this with other bricks, and use some fuel to cook those bricks. But in the process, the wall is also cooked. So it's a very radical way and very mysterious. I love this project, this kind of discoveries that shows how much more is there to be known. And the alchemy between all these very simple elements of earth, water, fire coming together. And when you finish such a project, I mean, you can sell your bricks or you can use the bricks to complete the structure. But I mean, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to be found out because technologies will take generations to develop. But already in the very few 30 years of my life, so many things have come about, I feel. And Ray Meeker's, who's the original pioneer, I did my PhD on his work. These are pictures of his work because he was using the house which he was making to fill it with other ceramic products like tiles, like water spouts, gutters, toilet pans, wash basin, all kinds of things, and bricks to cook them, and in the end your house is for free. I did the voluntariat project with nearly no materials almost. We did this because this project is our homes for homeless children, and we did a test of that. The 8th strategy is to use absorbed urban waste and to we are not encouraging the waste to go on being made. But at the moment, there is so much urban waste that is coming out that it can be spent and absorbed by direct reuse in buildings. So I'm doing a lot of explorations with my students. Like here, they are making sofas out of books. Anything to see the property that of thin paper, you can make it so strong on one direction and soft on the other direction where you need to lean on. But there are endless opportunities. I've made one, there are obsolete books. It's one area, huge area of urban waste. Books are being burnt and pulped all over the world. It's a huge area of waste. I was in Barcelona for a project called Library of Last Books, and I vacuum packed these books because that's how they do for the ham and all the delicatessen thing. And I wanted to use also their vernacular technology, and the books would have got burnt. So I have made a canopies out of that because it was only for 4 months. So I thought, why should we buy any materials? But that is what led to, also because they asked me to produce a concept for liberty with a Barcelona history, as you know. I wanted to say that knowledge makes you free, and to question what will be the place where the library is no more a place where you go to take books. So to just think about those things. So, this is the architecture. As you can see, it is very much located in the geometry and the context of the floor pattern below and the engineering above it, acknowledging the existing site and making the top extension of that as a gentle layer of the contemporary. But even in the Chipperfield Biennale 2012, I didn't build the wall house exactly 1-to-1. We took old wine glass bottles we have used to test for roofs. I have used other glass elements, broken chai cups as building blocks, basically just for fun also, but also not to buy anything, and put all the money into the labor of people, rather pay people more. It will always, if you spend more of your budget on the people rather than on materials, that means you're producing less pollution. You don't have to do any calculations. All the money is invested in the humans. And that is automatically, for me, a good economic strategy. Sometimes bicycle wheels, etc., we have used what is there to shape the windows, adjust the design to what makes it easy to do it. But also after the Venice Biennale, we have come with our students and we have tried to question what is going to happen afterwards with that what we built. So we had connected with Ray Biennale, who are those resisting the Biennale, and we connected with the social problems of Marghera, for example, and we took the pieces of the Biennale. We had made in the Arsenale. First and foremost, when I showed you the modular housing, only those 6 pieces came from Berlin because I needed to test them in a laboratory. All the rest was recycled from the previous German Biennale entry from the pavilion of the German pavilion. And I recycled all their boards and I made a full installation out of it, except 6 pieces. And in the end, this is the 3rd cycle. So after we finished that, we added to a refugee facility in Marghera with the community, with our students, and we produced the next project. Or these are other explorations. This is in Mexico. We are filling sand and water back in Tetra Pak. We are trying to build in real scale. In my studio, I want students to have the experience of real scale, real material, real place, so that they can learn engineering, construction, concept, urban design in a synthetic way. Sorry for the repetition here. Okay. So finally, I'm coming down towards the end now, that one of the important strategies for me today is to achieve with less materials, to achieve much more efficiency and to rely on smart engineering. When I put the focus on knowledge, it is of course engineering knowledge, but all the other knowledges about the human being. And I believe if you can invest in the human ingenuity, you will be able to save the maximum material, even if you build only with concrete or high energy materials, because you will use much less of it. You will first question if the whole building has to be even made. There are so many areas of savings that you can make and still have a good life, that I prioritize the engineering right now, because I'm very concerned that architecture students of today's age are not as good in engineering. Nothing to judge the student, but our systems of outsourcing have made us put too much power on the engineers, and not knowing enough ourselves sometimes makes us not in a good negotiating position. I'm going to explain here another version of ferrocement, because I'm trying to use less and less material. I'm now also looking at crease patterns. See, if you make a shell, it's efficient, but the form work is very complicated. So I'm trying to use facets so that it could be very easy to translate the shells, at the same time to make this very thin ferrocement very rigid. So because of the faceting, I can use paper as a formwork to be able to fold it. If there's a disaster relief structure, I can fold the formwork, open it, I can fold the mesh, open it. It's so little steel, and in only 4 days, I can produce a shelter, for example. Okay, so engineering gives me a lot of hope. And then I want to just show you a couple of buildings where even in concrete, again inspired by Nervi and other such engineers, to be able to produce large spans, less volume of concrete, very durable buildings, but people will not call it sustainable based on their religious approach to say, oh, it's concrete, so it's not green or whatever. But actually, the engineers will know how much volumes of materials have been saved. And a lot of these concrete elements are supported by ferrocement, like these railings, etc. So in the exploring of, because we want to be playful and explore new ideas, I think experimentation space has to be created for that. And to be able to think with the hand is very, very important, especially in the digital age in which we are growing up. I think it's very important to all the more, like in the COVID times, we have realized what is the digital technology good for and where are its limits? Where can we enhance the analog experience? And this I also feel in the architectural education. I like to prioritize the intuitive knowledge that comes through the hand. When people are making, you look at the concentration of, you can feel what they are thinking. These are students of mine from the AA School of Architecture or other workshops I have done, where there are certain ideas you would never get the idea if you did not play around directly with your hand. And if it, in my studios, I sometimes bring the sewing machine. If they are doing fabric structures, I bring the craftsmen who know it. I like to work interdisciplinary throughout. And that's what I mean by building community along with building knowledge. Here you see the students of UAV are working with the students of Australia, where I was a professor at that point. You know, see people, this is in the IAC laboratory in Barcelona. Students, by playing with the books, they're discovering properties of adhesion when they interlock pages, or through making installations for an event in Segovia. We have discovered a lot of things, you know, and this is very important to me, that students have to demystify the things they don't know by just going into the real thing directly. Finally, for the human scale, I started with a very big picture, right? About how the city metabolism is. And the same thing is that in the future, human scale, I already mentioned it, so I'll keep it short. We have to make sure that the people, they remain people-centric, even though we outsource to machines and technologies. Let the technologies not overwhelm. I'm doing this is a book of mine that's going to come out because Auroville, where I was based and where my practice was based, I had the opportunity to collaborate and learn a lot from Roger Anger, the chief architect, who had visions for urbanism that I find still very relevant because it is pedestrian. The whole city is, in fact, for him, often he used to tell me to look at Venice as a model because the context of the new city was already set in a new mobility 50 years ago, where the car was already taking a back seat. And suddenly it was allowing different things to happen, which are good for the future of cities. So I have a lot of experience and interest in rethinking cities of the future where human scale is retained. And I'm working on one urban project here, one of the anti-tower typology. We are trying to develop horizontal, slow mobility, etc. And beyond land ownership, I'm discussing here with Jan Gale, as you can see, about how could housing be approached in that context, you know, and how the human scale could be. The 12th strategy, which I'm not really going to explain you, I have already told you the summary of my entire lecture, that if you invest in human resources, you will economize on natural resources expenditure. You would don't try to save time. Time is your life. Try to happily invest the time, happily invest the brain, happily invest the muscles. We'll come out beautiful, we'll come out refined, we will evolve, and nothing will pollute. In the case you fail, it's not a loss. It's only you grow knowledgeable, you know, and I really think we need to reverse in that direction. I'm just going to end with few images of my Louisiana exhibition, where my strategy of recognizing that time is the most important resource to not be wasting as human beings. We are wasting so many resources, but we don't seem to, we are trying to save time and money and all kinds of things, but we are not bothered if we waste our own lifetime. When we retire, we are thinking, I should have done this and that. So my whole approach to time in architecture is explored through this Wunderkammer object, looking at the universe in a certain way, showing all my researches in all kinds of materials. What is interesting is that I have got models which are in 1 to 50 scale, spatial research, and next to it, there is 1 to 5 scale tectonic models, so that you can see that architecture is a perfect coming together between the material and the non-material, and the research on each side influences the other side. And this whole big urban project is produced there with my students from Yale University, Potsdam, and also Stuttgart, and KADK, we have enacted the new urban design, and in one-to-one scale, the facade of the future, which will be solar power generating, and include, even so the construction is of a very high scale. I mean, it's tall, 18 stories, but the roof is where all the paved areas are and the grounds are kept green. But you can see the human scale that is achieved on the, even though it's a high density. That is my research at the moment for the future of cities. And all the research I did is now positioning me to contribute to the future of housing and the future of facades. Even that paint is a power generating material that can be applied. There is a waste denim facade options. Urban farming is an integral part. All of this is integrated in the my new visions for future of human habitat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anupama. Thank you for this stimulating introduction to your work, sharing with us insights, not so much on the products of architecture, but on the processes. And in this context of the present award ceremony addressed to young architects who are now in the transition from a formative academic experience to their professional careers and practices, it is very important and fascinating. I think we may at this point open up the discussion and ask the audience whether they have any questions that they would like to share via chat. Sì, potremmo a questo punto aprire al pubblico la discussione e chiedere loro di condividere con noi eventuali domande che vorrebbero porre all'architetto Kundoo. Ma forse potremmo già iniziare con una domanda. Maybe we can already start with one question. So you have spoken at the presentation about the importance of approaching the project holistically. So from the point of view both of the resident, the designer, the maker, the craftsman, but also the local community. And I'm wondering if you would like to speak a bit more about this. So how do you mediate as an architect between the different actors involved in the design and in the making process of the buildings that we saw today? And maybe also, how do you expect that this relational aspect of architecture will be changing in the following years?
I have to honestly say that it's not like I have a written management strategy for that. What helped me to do this is because I think when I studied architecture, I did not get that conditioning that some architects come out of 5 years of school feeling that they have to control everything. I don't feel like a control freak, you know. I have never think that our authorship has to be interpreted, that I have to take the burden now of how to make all this. You know, if you remain very natural, how have we been until we started studying architecture? We know how to get it. We don't have to talk only to the incestuous community of architects. We learned sometime in the school. If you just remember our lives before, we know how to talk to grandchildren, to grandparents, to talk to be friendly with anybody on the street, you know, just to be social. And if you genuinely do not think that you are the boss of the whole thing, I think it always happens naturally. I think it takes more energy to exclude people than it takes to include people. If you don't do anything, everyone comes in. If you don't close the door, everyone comes on their own. I didn't do anything. I just let them do, you know? I'm sorry to give this simple answer, but it's really so simple for me. It's like I don't feel I have to manage all those things. If I go to ask a potter and he will, I'm doing a little project in Chile, okay? So there's a potter's community, and if he has an idea and it's a good one, I'm not going to say, no, I didn't think of that. So I'm not going to allow that. When I hear a good idea and I'm excited, I think, okay, you know this man and he can do that. Okay, we change the design a little bit. You know, that's how I have gone about it. How I think the future will be, I think this whole way of competing and among each other, it's true that it raises the standard, but believe me, collaboration will raise the standard even more. When you can celebrate the beauty and the achievement of the other person. See, I love architecture more than I love only my own production. I can enjoy the music made by all those people, you know. I don't have to stick to my own song. It's just more rich like that. I hope it answers the question.
Yes, it does, and it makes us also think about how collaboration processes have changed in the last year. So the way we interact, the way we communicate, the way we carry out our work, and yes, also taking time, as you mentioned, so focusing on a stance of architecture which is closer to a long-term vision, and working and thinking with the hands through a continuous evolving also approach to architecture. So if there are no more questions, maybe we can conclude. And thank you again for your presentation. We can conclude here and give you the time to take up the interview which was scheduled for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to take 1 minute to say hello to my friend Andrea. Ciao. Nice to see you there. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to connecting with you on any social media, Instagram, whatever. Please feel free to continue the discussions with me. And I look forward to meeting you. It's a small world. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Okay. I would like to give the word now to Professor Lola Ottolini for the announcement of the awards.
Thank you, Anupama. Thank you so much. Grazie a tutti. Adesso passiamo al un altro momento importante che dà giustamente spazio ai nostri studenti, ai nostri laureati. E siamo al momento della proclamazione dei progetti menzionati e vincitori di questa 10ª edizione del Premio Michele Silvers. Lascio la parola alla professoressa Laura Daglio, che con noi ha condotto i lavori della commissione giudicatrice. Ho visto che molti dei partecipanti al premio sono presenti giustamente alla giornata di oggi e chiedo fin da subito quindi, se verranno menzionati, se verranno citati, di accendere le loro videocamere per un breve saluto. Professoressa Daglio.
Buonasera a tutti, grazie Lola. È con grande piacere e con grandissimo onore che quindi vi leggo gli esiti dei lavori di questa commissione. Solo un appunto per dire che è stato molto difficile scegliere, perché tutti i lavori che sono stati presentati erano di altissima qualità, altissimo valore, soprattutto quello che ci ha stupito è la ricchezza degli approcci progettuali presentati, sviluppati, e anche la ricchezza delle culture e dei contesti locali con cui i nostri studenti si sono confrontati. Faccio in anticipo i miei complimenti quindi a tutti i partecipanti e anche le congratulazioni a coloro che leggerò che sono stati selezionati. Quindi una prima menzione a Eleonora Fusetti, che ha presentato una tesi dal titolo Buenos Aires, città dello spettacolo, recupero del cineteatro Dante, Barrio La Boca, che aveva come relatore Pierfranco Galliani con Silvana Basile, e con la seguente motivazione della giuria. Per l'attenta rilettura degli elementi storico-architettonici e culturali peculiari del contesto preso in esame e per aver evidenziato il ruolo che gli edifici destinati all'attività culturale per lo spettacolo hanno avuto nella definizione dei caratteri identitari e morfologici della città e del suo costruito, per la coerenza con cui questa ricerca è confluita nell'ipotesi progettuale, dove è stata posta a fondamento di una proposta di coesistenza tra storia e presente che ben contraddistingue il progetto.
Complimenti Eleonora.
Grazie mille per la menzione. Sono molto contenta di questa menzione, appunto perché per me questa tesi ha significato molto, sia a livello universitario ma anche a livello personale, in quanto è stata sviluppata appunto durante il mio percorso di studi all'estero, appunto a Buenos Aires, e per me è stata veramente una grande crescita. Nello specifico questa tesi è seguita anche da una tesi che è stata sviluppata da me durante la laurea triennale e sempre riguardo appunto l'ambito dei cinema e dei teatri, visto appunto che la città di Buenos Aires è famosa soprattutto per questa presenza molto importante. Vi ringrazio ancora molto.
Grazie. Una seconda menzione va a Romila Faye-Strub e al Kistis Volonasi, per favore perdonate la pronuncia, con una tesi dal titolo Lima 4.0, Territorial Fragility as an Agent of Agricultural Innovation e Design Driven Research, che aveva come relatore il professor Alessandro Rocca e con la seguente motivazione. per la capacità del progetto di ridisegnare, attraverso un sistema integrato di spazi e percorsi, un paesaggio a scala umana totalmente armonizzato nel contesto in cui si inserisce, tramite una concezione cinetica dello spazio. Per l'attualità del tema proposto, che pone in evidenza la necessità di stabilire nuovi strumenti metodologici e di indagine nell'affrontare il progetto in modo complesso, non solo dal punto di vista del disegno architettonico, ma anche in tutte le sue implicazioni sociali, culturali e di sostenibilità.
Our decision to work in Peru stems from its rich agricultural heritage. The project is located in the Costa region that is characterized by a very arid climate. Over the past 50 years, the city of Lima has undergone a process of rapid urbanization that has invaded much of its agricultural land. It has undergone 3 key phases of transformation. Our project envisions a 4th, focused on strengthening its natural heritage. Urbanization is now threatening the Lurin Valley, one of the remaining agricultural lands known for its natural and patrimonial heritage. The project considers its fragility as something that embodies not only destruction, but also regeneration. In keeping with the idea of protecting the land, it takes on a layered approach composed of the existing natural environment below and a new, elevated built environment above. 3 separate yet codependent buildings are introduced that create a circular system related to food education, production, and consumption. Together, they form a new centrality in the city, a recreational district dedicated to the important agricultural heritage of the area.
Grazie ragazze, complimenti ancora.
Grazie mille.
Grazie mille.
Grazie.
È stato bellissimo poter far parte di questa bellissima iniziativa che avete e, come detta dall'altra ragazza, è stata un'esperienza unica, e non solo a livello proprio di architettura del progetto di tesi, ma anche a livello personale, e credo che quella sia una cosa molto importante che viene incoraggiata da questo premio. Grazie ancora.
Grazie. Una terza menzione invece a Shahabadi Yassin Noradini, con una tesi dal titolo The Painting Exhibition Without Painting, a Study of Architectural Space and Representation in Persian Miniature. Come relatore Fabrizia Berlingeri con Pierpaolo Tamburelli, con la seguente motivazione. Per l'originalità e la completezza dell'indagine metodologica proposta, per l'evidenziazione e l'originalità nell'esplorazione di un possibile approccio progettuale che parte dalla rappresentazione dell'architettura e giunge, attraverso un'attenta analisi critica, alla definizione dei suoi caratteri spaziali e costruttivi, per l'accuratezza dell'indagine metodologica proposta e per la qualità della restituzione grafica che ben evidenzia gli elementi fondativi del progetto.
Hello to everyone, and thank you to this presentation. I'm really happy that my work had been selected among all this work, and I'm happy to say this work will be continuing my PhD and have a chance and to have grants from other universities to continue this kind of research design based. which is mainly explored pictorial spaces, architectural spaces in 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional, and which gives us a massive philosophical discussion in possible and impossible space that we can discuss. I hope it will brings more and more chance to be presented among other presentations. Thank you all.
Thank you. Grazie. E ora le menzioni d'onore. La prima a Nodar Dekanositse con una tesi dal titolo Colchis on the Footprints of Argonauts through Rioni River Valley of Colchis Cultural Center Archaeological Museum in the Georgian Black Sea coast city of Poti Colimbari Island, Lake Palastiomi. Relatore Maurizio Meriggi con la seguente motivazione. Per l'originalità nella definizione del tema architettonico e del contesto geografico in cui si inserisce, interrogandosi sulla dimensione del tempo e delle culture, per l'approfondimento analitico dei caratteri peculiari del luogo, delle architetture tradizionali e la loro reinterpretazione in chiave contemporanea, per l'approccio progettuale che lega storia e mito in una proposta di grande attualità anche per l'attenzione posta ai sistemi costruttivi e ai temi ambientali e climatici. Va bene, grazie. La seconda menzione d'onore invece a Agnese Arrighetti e Filippo Gaspari, con la tesi del titolo Usina de las Ideas, un modello integrato per l'organizzazione innovativa del lavoro e la rigenerazione urbana a Belgrano, Buenos Aires, con relatrice la professoressa pompeiana Jarossi, con la seguente motivazione. Per la qualità dell'approfondimento storico-culturale proposto e per la capacità di averlo assunto quale elemento fondante dell'atto progettuale, per la valorizzazione critica degli aspetti tipologici che hanno disegnato storicamente gli edifici del contesto analizzato e per la loro integrazione in un dialogo tra storia e attualità e contemporaneità che ben contraddistingue il progetto. Grazie. Passo ora a comunicarvi i premi. La Commissione assegna il terzo premio a Valerio Colombo e Francesca Davoli con la tesi dal titolo Feng Guang, progetto per la protezione e la valorizzazione del Tempio Erlang. Relatore la professoressa Luisa Ferro, con la seguente motivazione. Per l'attenta rilettura del contesto storico-urbano in cui si inserisce il progetto e per la capacità di restituzione delle sue fragilità, nonché delle sue potenzialità, per l'intenzione di cura e valorizzazione che emerge dall'approccio progettuale e la coerenza con cui viene sviluppata nei diversi passaggi, per l'approccio multidisciplinare proposto e per la completezza nella sua restituzione che ridefinisce un corpo architettonico stratificato, dove il nuovo si innesta nelle trame dell'esistente e si pone in dialogo con il passato. Grazie. La Commissione assegna il secondo premio a Giulia Cecilia Bersani e ad Anna Brazzini e Giacomo Rinoldi con la tesi dal titolo Trace, From Memory to Presence, Performing Arts School in Barrio de las Letras, Madrid. Relatore, professor Giancarlo Floridi con Héctor e Lorza Fernandez con la seguente motivazione. Per l'approccio critico e analitico con cui viene riletto il contesto urbano nel quale si inserisce il progetto, la chiarezza metodologica con cui viene sviluppato e l'attenzione con cui è declinato le diverse scale affrontate, da quella urbana a quella architettonica, fino alla definizione degli spazi interni. Per la capacità di aver disegnato un unico organismo complesso e unitario all'interno del quale convivono diverse tipologie spaziali che, sebbene fortemente caratterizzate, collaborano all'immagine coerente dell'insieme e alla produzione di nuove articolazioni spaziali, generando nuovi luoghi per la città contemporanea.
Eccomi. Grazie mille. Non so se mi sentite.
Sì.
Grazie mille per il premio, davvero. Per noi è stato bellissimo fare questo progetto e spero che tanti altri studenti avranno questa opportunità nonostante il periodo un po' così. E vi ringrazio davvero.
Grazie, grazie a lei. Ed ora la Commissione assegna il primo premio a Francesca Prini con la tesi Metabolizing Metabolism, relatore il professore Emilio Faroldi con Marco Imperadori, Salvatore John Liotta, con la seguente motivazione: per l'originalità della proposta tematica e la metodologia con cui viene affrontato il tema del riuso di moduli abitativi prefabbricati in un contesto in cui tradizionalmente si predilige la sostituzione totale dei manufatti piuttosto che la loro conservazione. L'esperienza progettuale legata al contesto giapponese viene affrontata come occasione di rilettura critica di un movimento, quello del metabolismo, che ha fortemente segnato il disegno urbano internazionale tra gli anni 60 e 70 e viene qui reinterpretata in un'ottica di proiezione futura, per la realizzazione di un collage di diverse tipologie abitative che determina nuove composizioni, mettendo in luce temi di flessibilità e di domesticità, e per la cura con cui ne viene restituita la rappresentazione.
The thesis starts from the debate about the demolition of the Nakiin capsule tower that nowadays is in a state of extreme abandonment. Thanks to the possibility to detach the capsules, we consider them as a resource that can be reused. So, in our project, the capsule moved from Tokyo to Utsuchi, a community destroyed by the Tohoku tsunami where a lot of people are still left without a home. The new location is a flat square basement where the capsules are organized with the repetition of a new aggregative module. The outcome is a new village where public and private intersecate each other, trying to rebuild the lost sense of community. The most public space is the main square. Then there is external living, a semi-public space shared between the group of modules. Going now inside, there is the core that comes from the tradition and connect the capsules. We are now arrived in the most intimate space, designed for the individual, becoming their own peaceful world.
Preciso che la tesi è stata svolta in collaborazione con Selene Rini e Nicole Vettore, ma che solo Francesca Prini l'ha candidata al premio. Prego. Voleva dire qualcosa?
Ringrazio per il premio ricevuto, che appunto, come già citato, la tesi è stata svolta insieme a Selene e Nicole. È stata una bellissima esperienza che diciamo è stata un po' anche cambiata dal periodo in cui ci troviamo. Dovevamo andare in Giappone, ma purtroppo non siamo riusciti a partire. Abbiamo solo avuto collaborazioni con alcune figure di riferimento e per questo dobbiamo ringraziare Marco Imperadori, che in tutto ci ha seguito e ci ha sostenuto per tutta l'esperienza. Grazie davvero per l'esperienza, è stata davvero bellissimo fare questa tesi e ci ha dato un sacco. Grazie.
Grazie e congratulazioni a tutti.
Grazie mille. Congratulazioni a tutti. Grazie ancora. E grazie anche perché i nostri studenti abbiamo chiesto uno sforzo in più, abbiamo chiesto a loro di presentare i progetti attraverso un video, che è uno strumento a cui non sono proprio abituati, ma devo dire che sono riusciti a raccontare molto bene i loro progetti. Se la preside vuole dire qualcosa nel frattempo, o la signora San.
Io vorrei ringraziare tutti e fare moltissimi complimenti ai nostri laureati e ai nostri laureati, ai vincitori e ai menzionati di questo premio. Quelli che ho visto sono veramente dei progetti interessanti. E voglio farvi tutti i miei auguri, perché laurearsi in questo momento e iniziare a lavorare in questo momento non è facilissimo. Ma io mi auguro che saremo presto fuori da questa situazione, che quindi potrete trovare soddisfazione piena nel vostro lavoro, perché il lavoro nell'architettura è un lavoro sul campo, è un lavoro negli spazi e nei luoghi. Grazie moltissimo alla signora Silvia Hassan e a tutta la famiglia ancora per questo premio che ci vede uniti da un po' di anni. Grazie, grazie veramente e grazie a tutti voi che ci avete ascoltato. Grazie.
Volevamo salutarvi facendovi vedere un'anticipazione di questo video che stiamo preparando, che raccoglierà anche, diciamo, una testimonianza della giornata di oggi, in una breve anticipazione che dura proprio meno di un minuto. Vi chiediamo solo 2 minuti di pazienza per riuscire a farvi vedere questo piccolo video. Vorrei ricordare però, approfitto di questo momento per dire a tutti i menzionati e i premiati che verrà loro inviata una pergamena e che per i 3 progetti premiati, quando potranno, la signora Silvia Hassan sarà felice di regalare il libro che è stato fatto in ricordo di Michele, e lo potete venire a ritirare in presidenza della scuola.
Ok, servizio.
Io ringrazio ancora tutti i ragazzi che ogni anno sono più numerosi a presentare le loro tesi e ogni anno ci sono più candidati al premio. Grazie mille, auguro loro ogni successo.
Michele Silvers era lo studente ideale formato da questa scuola.
Grazie mille ancora a tutti. Troverete il video completo nella pagina dedicata al premio Michele Silvers entro la fine di marzo. Grazie davvero ancora a tutti per l'occasione che ci avete dato di poter curare questa 10ª edizione del premio. Arrivederci a tutti, grazie.
Grazie, arrivederci.
Grazie mille.
Grazie, arrivederci.
Grazie.
Grazie davvero.